Helen sat in the train compartment, eyes fixed on her phone screen. Her husband's message glowed like poison on the display. "Goodbye, you old cow. Your stuff is already in the dumpster." She read it again, then once more, and smiled quietly. Outside, autumn fields blurred past the window. Rain tapped steadily against the glass. Helen felt something unexpected, a strange calm, almost relief. David had finally shown his true face, brutal, cruel, ugly. 15 years of marriage, and it had come to this. An insult sent by text message. What he didn't know was that exactly 1 day earlier, she had done something that would change his life forever. Helen leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes, letting her mind drift to yesterday. She had woken at 5 in the morning. David was snoring beside her, sprawled across 3/4 of the bed as always. She rose quietly, dressed, and went downstairs to the kitchen. On the table sat a folder of documents, the result of 3 months of careful preparation. She opened it and reviewed the contents one more time. Bank statements, printed conversations, photographs, contracts, everything was in order. 3 months ago, Helen had accidentally picked up her husband's phone. He had left it on the kitchen counter, and she grabbed it thinking it was her own. The screen lit up with a notification from someone named Christina. "Baby, I can't wait for the weekend. I want you." Her heart dropped, but Helen didn't make a scene. She didn't scream or cry or throw dishes. Instead, she began quietly collecting information. It turned out Christina was 23. She worked as a receptionist at the company where David was commercial director. The affair had been going on for 6 months. David had rented her an apartment in a brand new building, bought her a car, and showered her with gifts, all of it paid for with family money. Helen worked as an accountant at a large corporation and earned well. For the past 10 years, her salary had been the household's primary income. David earned less, but was skilled at projecting the image of a successful businessman. In reality, he lived off his wife. The apartment was in Helen's name. She had bought it before the marriage, with money left by her late mother. The car was hers too. The cottage they had purchased 5 years ago was also registered in her name. David had pushed for joint ownership, but Helen, by a stroke of luck, had followed the advice of her attorney friend and kept everything in her own name. When Helen understood the full scale of the betrayal, she went to that same friend, Victoria, an experienced family law attorney. "Divorce is war," Victoria said, studying the documents carefully. "And in war, the one who is better prepared wins. You have the advantage. All the assets are in your name. You earn more, and you have proof of his affair and misuse of family funds." "What do I do?" Helen asked. "Prepare, gather evidence. Then strike so fast he won't know what hit him." And so Helen prepared. She hired a private investigator who delivered a full report on David's activities. Photos of him and Christina at restaurants, hotels, a resort in the Bahamas he had described as a business trip, video footage, witness statements. David had been sending Christina large sums of money, covering her rent, buying her jewelry. In just 6 months, he had spent nearly $200,000 on his mistress, money Helen had set aside for their cottage renovation and their daughter's education. Yes, they had a daughter, Anna, 18 years old, a first-year student at a medical school in another city. She lived in the dormitory and came home only for holidays. Helen had decided not to bring her into this ugly situation until it was over. Yesterday morning, sitting at the kitchen table with her folder of documents, Helen had taken the final step. She called Victoria. "I'm ready," she said. "Perfect. Come to the office at 10. We'll sign the divorce petition and file it with the court today. I've also prepared a property division claim and a damages suit." "Damages?" "He spent marital funds on his mistress without your consent. That's grounds for financial compensation, plus emotional distress. We'll send him a bill he won't forget." Helen arrived at the office exactly at 10 and signed everything. Victoria assured her the documents would be filed that same day. "Now, the most important thing," the attorney said. "Don't tell him anything. Let him find out about the divorce from the court summons. You leave for your conference as planned. By the time you're back, everything will already be in motion." Helen nodded. The trip was real. A professional accounting seminar she had deliberately not canceled so as not to raise suspicion. That evening she returned home. David was sitting on the couch, scrolling his phone, and didn't even look up. "I leave tomorrow," Helen said. He muttered. "Back the day after." "Fine." That was it. 15 years of marriage, and they had nothing to say to each other. The next morning she left, boarded the train. And now, 24 hours after filing the papers, she had received his message. Helen opened her eyes and looked at the screen again. "Goodbye, you old cow. Your stuff is already in the dumpster." She wondered what had triggered it. Had Christina demanded he make a clean break? Or had he simply grown that bold? It didn't matter. He could throw out whatever he liked. Her documents, jewelry, and family photos she had already taken to Victoria's office safe. Clothes could be replaced. She typed back, "All right, David, as you wish. Short, calm, emotionless." She sent it. A minute later his reply came. "Good riddance. I'm finally free of you. Christina moves in today." Helen smiled faintly. He hadn't even asked for a divorce. He'd simply thrown out her things and considered that sufficient. He clearly expected her to beg, to cry, to humiliate herself. Let him enjoy his freedom while it lasted. Very soon, a court summons would arrive on his doorstep, and he would discover exactly what that freedom was going to cost him. The train raced through rain-soaked fields. Helen ordered tea from the attendant and opened a book. The words wouldn't register. Her thoughts kept returning to David, to their marriage, to how it had all gone wrong. She had loved him once. He had been charming, funny, a natural romantic. They married when she was 25 and he was 28. Anna was 3 then. The early years had been genuinely happy. Then David began to change. He grew harsher, more distant. He stopped helping around the house, spent more and more time at work or with friends. Helen carried everything: the home, the child, the finances. And he criticized her for the weight she had gained, for looking tired, for letting herself go. He wanted someone young and carefree, and he had found exactly that. Her phone buzzed, a message from Victoria. "Helen, the papers have been filed. He'll receive the summons tomorrow. Stay strong. Everything will be fine." She replied, "Thank you." He already texted saying he threw out my things and doesn't need me anymore. The response was immediate. "Perfect. Screenshot that." It's evidence of emotional abuse. Helen saved the screenshots and forwarded them to Victoria. Dusk was settling outside the window. She finished her cold tea and thought about what came next. Divorce, asset division, court, and then a new life, without David, without his cruelty and contempt and betrayal. She was 40 years old, so much time still ahead, so many possibilities.
She smiled at her own reflection in the darkening glass. David thought he had gotten rid of an old cow. What he didn't realize was that the old cow had gotten rid of him, and very soon he would regret every single word. She scrolled through new messages. Don't bother coming back. I'm finally free. Christina is moving in tonight. Helen methodically screenshotted each one and sent them to Victoria. The seminar ended and she traveled home. The train pulled in early in the morning. She took a cab, not home. She wasn't ready for that yet. But to a small hotel in the city center she had booked in advance. She needed time to wait for David to receive the documents. It happened the following day, around noon. Helen had just finished a work call when her phone erupted in rapid succession. She declined the first 3 calls, then answered the 4th. What the hell is this? David's voice shook with rage. What divorce? What lawsuits? You received the documents, Helen said, calmly. The courier did his job. Have you lost your mind? He shouted. I threw you out. Me. You think you can just... David, she interrupted, and her voice held something he had never heard in it before. A quiet, cold steel. I filed for divorce the day before you sent me that charming message. Technically, I left you. You just didn't notice. Silence. She could almost feel him piecing it together. You planned all of this? He said slowly. Yes, she answered simply. 3 months, David. I've known about you and Christina for 3 months. About the apartment you rented with our money, the car you bought her, the Bahamas trip you called a business conference. You had me followed? I protected my interests, she corrected. And you know what's almost funny? If you had simply asked for a divorce, we could have handled this like adults. But you chose to throw my belongings in the trash and call me an old cow. Helen, listen. The pleading crept into his voice. We can talk this through. No need for courts, attorneys? Too late, she said flatly. You made your choice when you sent that message. Now I'm making mine. You can't take the apartment, he exploded. I live there. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, David. Maybe in the apartment you rented for Christina, with my money, by the way. Or has she already lost interest now that you have nothing left? She heard him breathing hard into the phone. I'll file a counterclaim, he snarled. I'll find an attorney who will destroy your Victoria. Please do, Helen said. And her indifference was entirely genuine. Just keep in mind that I have every bank statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence showing exactly where you spent $200,000 of our joint savings. I have witness statements. And now I have your lovely messages where you brag about throwing out my belongings and call me names. So go ahead. What, David? An old cow? A note of dry amusement entered her voice. This old cow supported you for years. This old cow bought the apartment, the car, the cottage. And you simply lived off her generosity while cheating with a girl your daughter's age. He hung up. Helen put her phone away and returned to her work. She felt that strange calm again, as if a weight she had been carrying for 3 months had finally lifted from her shoulders. That evening, Victoria called. His attorney reached out, she reported, a man named Paul Graham. He handles mostly commercial disputes. Family law is not his strength. What's he offering? A settlement. David is willing to drop his claims on the apartment and the cottage if you drop the damages suit. Helen laughed. So he's willing to relinquish what was already mine? In exchange for me forgiving $200,000 he stole. How generous. That's exactly what I told them, Victoria said with a hint of satisfaction. Graham pushed on the publicity angle, scandal, exposure. Think of your daughter. I reminded him that publicity would concern his client far more, given the nature of the evidence. When is the hearing? 3 weeks, preliminary session. But Helen, there's one thing, Anna. She's 18, an adult, but these are still her parents divorcing. Have you spoken with her? Helen went quiet. This was the only part of her plan that caused her genuine pain. Anna adored her father. She had always been Daddy's girl. How do you tell her the truth? Not yet, she admitted quietly. I don't know how. You'll have to, Victoria said gently. Better she hear it from you than from David. He may try to spin it so you look like the villain. I know. She had barely finished the call when her phone rang again. The screen read, Annie. Helen steadied herself, then answered. Mom? Her daughter's voice was confused and frightened. What's going on? Dad just called and said some strange things about a divorce. Helen closed her eyes. David had already gotten to her. Of course he had. He had always been the kind of man who hid behind others. Annie, sweetheart, she began, I need to tell you something. Where are you right now? In my dorm. Mom, what happened? Dad said you filed for divorce and want to take everything from him? Is that true? Not quite. Helen stood and walked to the hotel window. Annie, I did file for divorce. But the reasons are nothing like what your father told you. What reasons? Anxiety filled her daughter's voice. Helen took a deep breath. She didn't want to shatter the image Anna had of her father, but she couldn't keep lying. Your father has been having an affair for 6 months. With a woman named Christina. She's 23. He spent nearly $200,000 of our savings on her, rented her an apartment, bought her a car, took her on vacations. A long silence followed. Helen heard only her daughter's breathing. Mom, Anna said at last, her voice trembling. Are you sure? Could there be a mistake? I'm sure, sweetheart. I have all the evidence. I've known for 3 months. 3 months? A sharp intake of breath. And you said nothing? I was preparing, Helen said simply. Gathering evidence, consulting my attorney. Annie, I know this is hard, but I can't continue living with someone who betrayed me and drained our savings for another woman. What does Dad say? Your father sent me a message calling me an old cow and informing me he had thrown my things in the trash, Helen said. No anger in her voice, only exhaustion. He assumed I knew nothing and wasn't ready. But I filed the papers the day before his message. Anna sobbed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. This is between me and your father. You are our daughter, and we both love you. That will never change. But I cannot forgive what he has done. I need time, Anna whispered, to process all of this. Of course. Helen felt a tightening in her throat. I love you, Annie, whatever happens. When her daughter hung up, Helen sat down on the bed and, for the first time in 3 months, allowed herself to cry. She was sitting in the hotel conference room reviewing financial reports when her phone buzzed. Anna's name on the screen. Helen glanced at the time, nearly 11 at night, late for a call. Annie, what's wrong? She stepped into the corridor. Mom? Her daughter's voice was shaking. Dad is outside the dormitory. He's been sitting in his car for 2 hours. Security says he's drunk. Helen's chest tightened. She knew exactly what David was like when he had been drinking. Aggressive, unpredictable. Are you safe? Is your door locked? Yes, I'm in my room. But he keeps calling and texting, saying he wants to talk. Mom, I'm scared.
Helen clenched her jaw. Even now, with his world collapsing, he could only think of himself. "Listen to me carefully," she said, keeping her voice steady though everything inside her was burning. "Do not go down to him under any circumstances. If he tries to push past security, they will call the police. Block his number and go to sleep." "But he's my dad." "Which is exactly why he won't hurt you," Helen said firmly. "He's trying to put pressure on me through you. Don't let him manipulate you." After the call ended, Helen stood alone in the empty corridor, staring out the window at the scattered lights of a city indifferent to her problems. She took out her phone and called Victoria. "Good evening," the attorney answered on the third ring. "Has something happened?" "David is drunk outside our daughter's dormitory. He's been there for hours trying to get her to talk to him." A brief silence. "That's actually useful for our case," Victoria said. "Ask Anna to save all his calls and messages. If there's security footage outside the building, we'll request it. Erratic behavior, attempting to pressure a child, all of this helps us in court." "I don't want to use Annie," Helen said quietly. "You're not using her. You're protecting her." "There's a difference," Victoria replied, her voice firm. "David chose this path himself. You are simply recording the facts." Helen returned to her room but couldn't work. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The woman who had spent 15 years building a family, sacrificing her career, saving money so her daughter could have a better education. That woman was gone. Someone had taken her place. Someone harder. Someone less willing to forgive. Morning brought a message from Victoria. "David has filed a counterclaim. He's requesting half your assets. His attorney argues that you drove him to infidelity through emotional coldness." Helen read it 3 times, and each time the fire inside her burned a little brighter. "What are our options?" she typed back. "Meet tomorrow when you return. I'll have the counter-arguments ready. We have everything we need. Don't worry, don't worry. Easier said than done." Helen made tea and sat by the window. Somewhere out there, David was sitting too. Maybe in Christina's apartment, maybe in a hotel, maybe drunk in his car again, trying to figure out how to regain control. He had no control left, and he never would again. The next day, Victoria greeted her with barely concealed satisfaction. "Excellent news." She slid a folder across the desk. The investigator turned up additional material. It appears David wasn't just spending family money on Christina. He was also writing off personal expenses as corporate costs. Fake business trips. Inflated entertainment budgets. This could be classified as fraud. Meaning? Meaning that in addition to the civil suit, we can trigger a tax investigation into his conduct at the company. Victoria set her glasses on the desk and looked Helen directly in the eyes. "The question is how far you're willing to go." Helen thought of the message. "Goodbye, you old cow." She thought of David drunk outside their daughter's dormitory. She thought of 15 years of marriage in which she had given everything, while he was building a separate life. "As far as necessary," she said quietly, but without any hesitation. Victoria nodded. "There's one more thing. I looked into Christina. She comes from a modest background. Before meeting David, she was renting a single room. Now she has a large apartment and a car. It will be interesting to see how she explains those assets to a tax auditor on a receptionist salary."
Helen felt a small prick of guilt. Christina was young and foolish, but she had known perfectly well that she was breaking up someone else's marriage. She had known where the gifts came from. "Do what you think is right," Helen said. "One more thing." Victoria opened another folder. David's counterclaim. Half the apartment, half the cottage, half the car, and monthly spousal support of $5,000. He claims he was financially dependent on you due to the dynamics of the marriage. I've seen bold claims in my career. This ranks among the boldest. And our position? We have documentation proving every asset was purchased with your personal funds, both before and during the marriage. The apartment, your money; the cottage, your money; the car, your salary; every receipt, every bank statement. As for his income, our investigator found that for the past 6 months, David's official salary was barely $3,000 a month. Everything else was paid under the table, cash, no taxes, and he spent every dollar of it on Christina. Helen sat in silence, absorbing this, while she had worked to support their family, paid for Anna's tuition and housing, bought groceries. He had been pocketing cash and keeping a mistress.
"The court will dismiss his counterclaim," Victoria said confidently. "He has no legal basis for any of it. And we've filed a counter-demand for the $200,000 he took from our joint savings." Helen's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She opened the message and felt the blood drain from her face. "You will regret this. I will destroy you in court. You'll end up with nothing, you stupid woman." Victoria noticed the shift in her expression. "What is it?" Helen handed her the phone without a word. The attorney read it and frowned. "That's a threat. We're attaching this to the file. He is digging himself deeper with every message he sends." "He won't stop," Helen said quietly. "David has never known how to lose." "Then he'll learn," Victoria said bluntly. "He has no other option." That evening, Helen sat in her kitchen as the rain picked up outside, drumming against the windowsill. She stared at the original message on her phone. "Goodbye, you old cow. Your stuff is already in the dumpster." When she first received it, she had smiled because she knew he had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. But now, weeks later, smiling felt distant. What she felt instead was exhaustion, emptiness. Divorce isn't triumph, she realized. It's wreckage. The wreckage of everything you built and hoped for and believed in. She had done the right thing. She had protected herself and her daughter. But that didn't make it easier. Her phone buzzed again. "Annie." "Mom?" Her daughter's voice was fragile. "Can I come tonight? Right now?" "Of course, sweetheart. What happened?" He messaged again. "Dad says he wants to meet, wants to explain himself. Mom, I don't know what to do." "Come," Helen said. "We'll talk." 2 hours later, Anna was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a mug of hot cocoa warming her hands. She looked exhausted, dark circles, pale face. "He says it was all a misunderstanding," the girl said quietly. "That you got the wrong idea, that he loves us both, that we're a family." Helen sat beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. "Annie, listen to me. Your father made his choice. He chose someone else. He spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on another woman while I was working around the clock. He stole money from his employer. He called me a cow and threw out my belongings. That is not a misunderstanding. That is who he is." Tears slid down Anna's face. "But he's still my dad," she whispered. "He taught me to ride a bike. He took me to the zoo. He read to me every night." "I know," Helen said softly. "And that is the hardest thing.
that a person can be a good father and a terrible husband at the same time, can love a daughter and betray a wife. People are complicated, Annie, but that doesn't mean we have to accept betrayal. Her daughter pressed close to her, and they sat that way for a long time beneath the sound of rain, two women betrayed by the same man. I'm afraid, Anna admitted, afraid that after the trial, everything changes for good, that I won't have a father anymore. You will always have a father, Helen said, but I no longer have a husband, and that is right. Her phone lit up again. David, from another number. Meet me before the hearing. Let's talk like adults. Maybe we can work something out. Helen showed it to Anna. What will you say? Anna asked. Helen thought for a moment, then typed slowly. All conversations go through our attorneys, in court. She pressed send. Anna looked at her with something close to wonder. You don't even want to hear him out? No, Helen said firmly. I listened to him for years. Now he can listen to the judge. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She frowned and answered. Helen? A man's voice, unfamiliar. This is Detective James Peterson. I'm handling the fraud case at the Alliance Corporation. I need to meet with you urgently. We have new information about your husband. Her heart dropped. What kind of information? I can't discuss it by phone. Can you come in tomorrow at 10? He gave her the address of the investigations office. When the call ended, Anna was watching her mother with wide eyes. What now? Helen shook her head slowly. I don't know. But it seems your father's story isn't over yet. Helen rode to the investigations building the next morning in a cab, nervously turning the strap of her bag between her fingers. Detective Peterson's voice had carried an unusual undercurrent, not the flat, detached tone of official procedure, but something almost urgent. What else could there be? $3 million from the company. $200,000 from the family account spent on a mistress. Wasn't that enough? On the third floor, Peterson met her at the door of his office. A thick folder lay on his desk beside an open laptop. Please sit down. He gestured to the chair across from him. What I'm about to tell you substantially changes the picture of this case.
Helen sat, folding her hands in her lap. While reviewing your husband's financial transactions, we found something significant. He opened the folder. In addition to the funds stolen from the company, David has been laundering money through shell companies. What? Her back went cold. He created 3 front companies through which he ran fictitious transactions. The total amount comes to approximately $1.2 million. Peterson laid printed bank statements on the desk. The money came in from individuals with criminal backgrounds, was converted to cash, and was moved offshore. Helen stared at the figures. She could not absorb what she was seeing. David, the man she had shared a home with for 15 years, trusted, built a life with, was not just an adulterer and a thief. He was part of a criminal scheme. There's more. Peterson turned the laptop toward her. Yesterday, a woman came to see us, a Michelle Sullivan. She claims to be the mother of his son. The room seemed to tilt. Helen gripped the edge of the desk. His son? The boy is 3 years old. She presented a birth certificate with David listed as the father. Peterson produced a copy. She says your husband supported her and the child for the past 4 years, paid rent, gave money for expenses. When his legal problems began, he simply disappeared. Helen took the document with trembling hands. Birth certificate, father, David, date matched, mother, Michelle Sullivan.
She's requesting child support, Peterson continued, and claims David promised to marry her once he was divorced from you. So Christina wasn't the first. Helen heard her own voice as if from across a room, and not even the second. It appears not. Miss Sullivan says she met your husband 5 years ago. He told her he was single, divorced for 2 years. When she became pregnant, he asked her to keep the relationship quiet, citing problems at work. Helen remembered that period. 5 years ago, David had worked late constantly, traveled for what he called business. She had believed he was building something for their future. He had been building another life. Where is she now? Next door. She agreed to meet you, if you're willing. Helen nodded slowly. She needed to see this woman. A few moments later, she was looking at someone in her early 30s. Slim, dark hair pulled back, simple jeans and a sweater. She looked worn and tense. I didn't know. Michelle's voice shook the moment she sat down. I swear I didn't know he was married. He showed me photos of his apartment, told me he lived alone, said he'd been divorced for years. Helen studied her. This woman had also been deceived, used, abandoned with a child. Do you have a photo of your son? She asked. Michelle unlocked her phone and held it out. A blond boy with gray eyes grinned at the camera. A face that looked exactly like photographs Helen had seen in the family album when David was young. His name is Arthur, Michelle said softly. He loves his daddy. He asks about him all the time. Did you know about Christina? Helen asked, handing back the phone. His other mistress. 23 years old. He spent $200,000 on her in 6 months. Michelle went pale. No. I thought Arthur and I were his only secret. He said he was sorting everything out, that we'd be able to live openly soon. Peterson cleared his throat. Ladies, I understand this is difficult, but I need to complete the record. Miss Sullivan, can you confirm your statement for the record? Yes. Michelle wiped her eyes. David gave me $2,000 a month for the baby. Paid $1,500 a month in rent. Sometimes bought clothes or toys. The last time I saw him was 3 weeks ago. He said there were problems at work, asked me to wait, and then he disappeared. Phone off, no replies. He's in detention, Helen said quietly. Under investigation for fraud and money laundering. Michelle covered her face with her hands. My God, what am I supposed to do? I have a mortgage. I have a child. I'm alone. Helen looked at her and felt something unexpected, a strange kinship. They had both been deceived by the same man. Both believed his lies, made plans, imagined a future. Michelle had simply gotten the worse end of it. Detective Peterson. Helen turned to him. Does this affect the main case? Significantly. Funding a second household explains where a portion of the stolen money went, and the concealment of a child speaks directly to character. It's an aggravating factor. And the child support? For Arthur? Ms. Sullivan can file a claim. But given that David has no official income and is under criminal investigation, recovering anything will be difficult until the legal proceedings conclude. Helen reached into her bag and took out one of Victoria's cards. Call her, she said to Michelle. She'll help you file a proper support claim and walk you through what to do next. Michelle took the card, staring at Helen.
Why would you help me? You have no reason to. He's the one who's guilty, Helen said, and stood. He should answer for all of it. She paused on the front steps of the building when she left, breathing the cold air. Her mind was spinning. A 3-year-old son, another woman. over $1 million laundered. How many more secrets had the man she shared a bed with for 15 years been keeping? Her phone buzzed, a message from Anna. "Mom, where are you? Please call." She dialed. "Mom." Anna's voice was anxious. "A woman came to the dormitory asking about you and Dad. She said she had important information, left her number. Her name was Sandra." What did she look like? Early 40s, expensive coat, blonde. She seemed very nervous. Helen felt her heart drop. Not another one. Sandra turned out to be the final piece of the puzzle. The last layer in a mosaic of deception David had been assembling for decades. They met at a small cafe. Helen came alone. Anna had flatly refused any involvement with the ghosts of her father's past. Sandra was already there, at a corner table, stirring a cup of cold coffee. Up close, she looked tired despite the expensive clothes and careful makeup. The shadows under her eyes went deeper than foundation could reach. "Thank you for coming." She stood and extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "I know how strange this must seem." "Strange is an understatement," Helen said, sitting without removing her coat. "You tracked down me and my daughter. You say you have important information about my husband, former husband," she corrected herself. "Who are you?" Sandra drew a slow breath and wrapped both hands around her cup. "My name is Sandra Crawford. I was David's wife, legally." The floor seemed to shift beneath Helen's feet. "We married when he was 20, Sandra continued, her voice steady, as if she had rehearsed this speech many times. "I was a year older. We lived together for 2 years. He was a sales manager. I was an accountant, an ordinary young couple." "He told me he had never been married before me," Helen said. The familiar mixture of rage and revulsion was rising inside her. "He told me he loved me and would always be there." Bitterness edged Sandra's voice. "He made the same promises to our daughter. But when I became pregnant with our second child, he vanished, cleaned out our bank accounts, took the valuables, and disappeared." Helen's breath caught. "A daughter? You have a daughter with David?" Sandra nodded and opened her phone to a photo. A beautiful young woman in her early 20s, dark hair, familiar features. Helen recognized the stubborn set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. "Diana, she's 21, architecture school." Sandra put the phone away. "She has never met her father. David left when she was 2 years old." "My God." Helen pressed her hands to her face. "How many children does he actually have?" "I tried to find him," Sandra continued. "Filed missing persons reports. Pursued child support through the courts. He was untraceable, changed employers, addresses, phone numbers. I found out later he had gone to another city for 6 months. And when he came back, he was already with you. He never paid a single dollar in support. Not in 20 years? The court orders were never closed, but enforcement could never locate him. He worked off the books, kept assets in other people's names, a professional fugitive. His total outstanding debt in child support now exceeds $300,000. Helen sat in silence as the nausea built. The man she had shared half her life with, who had been her husband, the father of her daughter, was a stranger. A predator wearing a familiar face. "How did you find me?" she asked. "I saw his photo in a news article." Sandra produced a tablet with a saved page. A local outlet reported a criminal investigation against a commercial director. There was a photo. I recognized him immediately, though he had aged and put on weight. I went straight to my attorney, she continued. We pulled the old support case,
tracked down every court order. The enforcement action was never terminated. And now that he's involved in a criminal proceeding, there's nowhere left to hide. "So you want the money?" Helen said. "Not only that." Sandra met her eyes. "I want him to answer for everything. For the daughter he abandoned, for the years that were stolen, for the lies. I heard you filed for divorce. I want to join. I want the court to know the full truth about who this man is." Helen nodded slowly, her mind already arranging the pieces. "Do you have the marriage certificate, Diana's birth certificate, the court support orders?" "Every document." Sandra patted her bag. 20 years of paperwork. I always knew he'd surface again. Then go to my attorney tomorrow." Helen set Victoria's card on the table. "Tell her everything you told me. We'll combine what we have." Sandra's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the card. "Thank you. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or that you'd be angry with me." "Angry with you?" Helen gave a short, bitter laugh. "You're as much a victim as I am, as Michelle is, as Christina was. David is a professional liar and manipulator. He destroyed lives without a second thought. There's one more thing." Sandra hesitated. "While I was searching for information about him, I found something odd. Immediately after our divorce, he opened an LLC under someone else's name. The company existed for 3 years, then was dissolved, but large sums passed through it. Money was moved offshore. I have a contact in the tax office who pulled the records." She paused. "Around $800,000 moved through that company over 3 years. Helen's expression shifted. "The investigators have already found evidence of over $1 million laundered in recent years. But if David was doing this 20 years ago, then this isn't new behavior. He's been running these schemes for decades." "That's what it looks like," Sandra agreed. "I'll give everything to your attorney. It might help the investigation." They sat for another hour exchanging stories. Sandra described the young David, charming, charismatic, effortlessly magnetic, how he gradually changed, became secretive and irritable, how she would find unfamiliar phone numbers, strange receipts, how he would swear his innocence, accuse her of paranoia, make her feel like she was losing her mind. Helen listened and recognized everything. The same script, the same tactics, the same lies. Only the names and dates had changed. When they said goodbye outside the cafe, Sandra pulled Helen into an embrace. "Together we'll get him," she whispered. "I'm sure of it." Helen held her back, feeling an unexpected solidarity. Two women separated by 20 years, bound together by the same betrayer. The next morning, Victoria sat across from Sandra in her office, recording every detail. When Sandra finished, the attorney leaned back with a look of barely restrained satisfaction. "This changes everything," she said. "Absolutely everything. Concealing a prior marriage when registering a new one. Evading support payments for 20 years. Possible criminal fraud dating back decades. I'll pass the offshore information to the detective." She added, "If David has been laundering money since the early 2000s, the sentencing implications are severe. And if we can locate those funds, or any portion of them, they can be seized to cover his debts." Helen watched the rain trace slow lines down the window. The first divorce hearing was 3 days away. Now added to that, a petition to annul the marriage, Sandra's support claim, a criminal case for fraud and money laundering spanning decades. David had built his house of cards over 20 years, and now it was falling, burying him beneath the wreckage of his own making. Justice Helen thought, sometimes moves slowly. But when it finally arrives, it is absolute. Helen sat in the courtroom, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The rain outside had stopped, but the room itself was heavy with tension. Anna sat beside her, pale but composed, her fingers laced through her mother's. Across the aisle, David was unshaven, his suit wrinkled, his eyes red and swollen. His attorney, Paul Graham, shuffled papers with barely concealed anxiety. Victoria, by contrast, looked calm and settled, the composure of someone who knows the battle is already won. The judge, a composed woman in her 50s, called the session to order. Victoria presented the divorce petition and asset division claim with methodical precision. Bank records, photographs, the investigator's report. She established clearly that every asset, the apartment, the cottage, the car, had been purchased with Helen's funds. She detailed David's expenditures on Christina and Michelle, presented his threatening and abusive messages, and described his attempts to pressure Anna. David sat motionless, staring at the floor. When Paul Graham rose to present the counterclaim, half of Helen's assets, monthly spousal support, his argument was that Helen's emotional coldness had pushed David to seek affection elsewhere, that he was a victim of circumstances. Victoria's expression didn't change. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce new evidence." She laid documents before the bench. Exhibit A, a marriage certificate showing the defendant was previously married to Sandra Crawford. That marriage was dissolved, but David failed to disclose it when registering his subsequent marriage to my client. This constitutes grounds to declare the second marriage invalid. A murmur moved through the room. David's head snapped up.
Exhibit B. The defendant has a daughter from his first marriage, Diana Crawford, and a son, Arthur Sullivan, by a Ms. Michelle Sullivan. He evaded child support payments for Diana for 20 years. The outstanding debt exceeds $300,000. He has paid nothing toward Arthur's support. Sandra and Michelle sat in the gallery as witnesses. Sandra gave a quiet nod to the judge. Michelle held a photo of her son. Furthermore, Victoria opened a final folder. The defendant is under criminal investigation for fraud and money laundering. The total sum under investigation exceeds $1.2 million, including schemes dating back over 20 years. The Alliance Corporation is pursuing civil damages. Tax authorities have opened a separate inquiry. Paul Graham jumped to his feet. "This has no bearing on the divorce proceedings." "It has every bearing," Victoria replied evenly. "It characterizes the defendant's conduct. He systematically deceived, stole, and manipulated everyone around him. His demands for asset division and spousal support are an extraordinary act of bad faith from a man who left 2 children without financial support." The judge called a recess. In the corridor, David approached Helen. His eyes were desperate. "Helen, please," he said quietly. "Let's talk. I didn't mean for any of this. I got lost. For Annie's sake." Anna turned away. Helen looked at him without warmth. "You destroyed this yourself, David. Now you face the consequences." When the session resumed, the judge read the ruling. The divorce was granted. The marriage was declared void due to concealment of a prior marriage. All property remained with Helen. David was ordered to pay $200,000 in damages for misappropriated marital funds, plus $50,000 in emotional distress. His counterclaim was dismissed in its entirety. The court referred both child support matters, Diana's and Arthur's, to enforcement services for immediate collection.
David sat as if deflated. His attorney leaned over and whispered, "We appeal." But the look on David's face held no conviction. 1 month later, the criminal trial concluded. Investigation had revealed offshore accounts, financial ties to known criminal figures. David admitted partial guilt and tried to shift blame to associates. The judge sentenced him to 8 years, with asset forfeiture. Money recovered from the offshore accounts was distributed. Child support to Sandra and Michelle, damages to Helen, restitution to the company. Helen stood at the window of her apartment and watched the spring light. 6 months had passed since that first message. She had returned to work, joined a gym, started traveling. Anna had moved back in with her. They went to therapy together, untangling what had been done to them. One evening, Sandra called. "Helen, thank you. I received the first support payment. Diana will be able to finish her degree without debt." "I'm glad," Helen said. "Michelle is doing well too. Your attorney helped her. Arthur started daycare. She found a job." They all gathered one evening. Helen, Anna, Sandra with Diana, Michelle with Arthur. An unusual kind of family joined by a shared past. Over dinner they laughed and told stories. Anna played with her little half-brother. Diana talked about her plans. Helen watched them and felt warmth move through her. David was in prison, reckoning with what he had done. He had lost everything: his freedom, his money, his reputation. But the women he had betrayed had found strength, not revenge, just justice. And that was the real victory. Life continued. Helen raised a glass toward the new beginning. Everyone around the table lifted theirs and echoed the toast. 2 years passed. Helen stood on the porch of the cottage. The renovation she had saved for was finally finished. Anna was in her 3rd year of medical school and came on weekends, full of ideas and energy. She had grown close to Diana and Arthur. Her half-siblings had become part of her world. Sandra had started her own accounting firm. Michelle, with the help of a small grant, had enrolled in a design program and was dreaming of her own studio. Christina had stayed in her hometown, married someone her own age, and was working at a cafe. She had written Helen a letter of apology. Helen read it and let it go. From prison, David sent letters. First bitter, then full of remorse. He asked Anna's forgiveness. She replied rarely and carefully. "I love you, Dad, but rebuilding trust is a road you have to walk yourself," she wrote once. Helen did not reply at all. She had found someone, a colleague, steady and kind. They walked in parks, talked about books, made plans for trips. Slowly but genuinely. At a family picnic one afternoon, Helen, Anna, Sandra, Diana, Michelle, and Arthur. The little boy ran up to Helen and wrapped his arms around her legs. "Aunt Helen, you're good," he said. She lifted him up and felt tears she hadn't expected.
This was not an ending, it was a beginning. Justice had not only punished the guilty, it had healed what had been broken. Women brought together by pain had built something new, something honest and solid and full of hope. And David, in his cell, understood at last. The price of a lifetime of lies is solitude. That was the most fitting sentence of all. Helen closed her eyes and listened to the sound of children laughing. Life, she thought, sometimes gives you a second chance. She was not going to waste hers. Years went by. Anna finished medical school, became a doctor, exactly as she had always dreamed. She married a classmate, and they had a son, Helen's first grandchild. At the christening, everyone gathered. Sandra and Diana, who had become an architect designing homes for low-income families. Michelle and Arthur, now a teenager absorbed in athletics. David was released after 6 years, with credit for good behavior. He came to Helen with flowers, older, diminished. "Helen, I've changed. Please. Give me a chance to see the children." She looked at him for a long moment. "The children will decide for themselves. As for me, I've forgiven you, but there is no going back." He nodded and left. Anna met with him a month later, building careful bridges. Diana and Arthur, in time, did the same, under the watchful guidance of their mothers. David found modest work, paid his support reliably, lived quietly and honestly. That was his redemption. Helen, at 50, felt younger than she had in years. She wrote a book about her experience, published anonymously, for anyone who needed it. It helped many women find the courage they didn't know they had. Justice, she had come to understand, is not always a prison sentence or a financial settlement. It is healing, growth, and the love that outlasts betrayal. On an autumn afternoon, walking with her grandson through golden light, Helen smiled. Her life was full